like that. I've made the mistake in the past of getting a loan to, for example, to purchase a business, another catering company a handful of years ago, getting a loan to purchase that company and not getting enough. I got enough to purchase the company, but I didn't get enough to then get in and fix a bunch of stuff and do a bunch of other things that I needed to do. So then that money came out of cash flow. So then I was behind on my cash flow. So when you get a loan, in some sense, you always want to ask for more because it's inherent for business owners to not ask for enough. And you can't, 2 months later, you can't go back to them and say, hey, actually, I could use another 20,000 or whatever the situation is. Right. So you always want to get more up front and then perhaps pay it off early or whatever, which, that usually doesn't happen. But then with that debt that you're acquiring, setting up a schedule, just like you're going to pay rent every month, you want to set up a schedule of your amortization schedule, perhaps, of how much interest and principal you're paying. Because the principal is going to be a little invisible when you're looking at your monthly P&L. That principal is kind of, it's hard to remind yourself of. The interest falls on your P&L, so you can see that pretty easily, and it's, going to be in your, wherever you put in your expenses and all that. So mapping that out is critical. And one of the biggest challenges with this coronavirus situation is, again, for maybe a catering example, is, all right, so we pretty much fell off a cliff at the beginning of March, not knowing how long it was going to go. So March and April events postponed. We're like, okay, maybe we'll get back to work in May. And now it's May, 4th. Yeah. Maybe we'll get back to work in June. And now we're understanding we really don't know. So when you, and the SBA loans, I think, are going to be, they're going to hold off on 6 months for payments or something like that. But any loan you get, you got to plan out how you're going to pay it back. And if you have no idea when your business is going to open, cafe, catering company, whatever, that's a big question mark. And one thing that I've really been doing in the past couple of weeks is collecting all these question marks and putting them somewhere that I can, on a piece of paper. I've gotten into blank pieces of paper and Sharpie with a lot of my note taking. But identifying the questions and the unknowns, and then just as importantly, or maybe more importantly, identifying the things you do know that are going on. Like, I do know my rent is X amount. I do know I called my credit card company and they're giving me 2 months. I do know I called AT&T and they're giving me time. So operating from what you know to be exactly true, and then picking one area of unknown stuff at a time will help. It will help combat your overwhelm and your worry and, all that kind of stuff. Because one thing we do have right now is time. We have a lot of time. And if you apply that time effectively, you can get through a lot of deep, complex situations that normally you wouldn't. Because when you have a cafe going or a catering company or whatever, you kind of don't have the quiet and the time to get really, really deep into the granular finances.
Yeah.
And set up your own, Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I wanted to go back to mapping out your finances. I think I want to sort of drive home that point for a lot of people. I think it's interesting, when we deal with the accounting and the bookkeeping of our business, it never feels like everything we need is in one place, right? It's like you go to your P&L and it's a great tool that provides you with a lot of information. But like you were just pointing out, your interest payments are tracked there, but your principal payments aren't. But that is absolutely cash that's going out of your business every single month. And so I talk to a lot of my clients and program members about creating what I call a profit plan, because the objective is to create a plan and a map to getting to profitability. But part of that is like having everything that's on your P&L in one place, but then what's not, that's actually like affecting your cash flow every single month. So I love that you have sort of a, mirrored philosophy to that, of like looking at everything and really jotting it all down. So I love that. And I also love identifying what you know and what you don't know. I think that that's a really great sort of tip and piece of advice for people. I know in the beginning of all of this, a lot of people were like, help me figure out how much money do I have and how long can I survive, right?
Yeah.
With no revenue coming in, but bills to pay. So help me sort that out. And then I'll get to work with going through that list, like you just mentioned, of who can I call to like get my payments reduced or eliminated for the time being. And
Hmm.
I think you made a really great point. It's still important to continue to do that on a monthly basis. So I want to make sure that that gets heard by people, because I think, when you call in the beginning and you make a plan and then you don't realize that, oh, this is really going to last longer than 2 months or longer than 3 months, right? You're
Right.
It's okay to go back, and in fact you should go back and revisit and have new conversations with AT&T and T and your landlord or whoever it might be. So I think kudos to you for doing that, and I think it's important for people to take away
Yeah,
from
and for different people, it's going to be a different level of comfort and different tools that are used. I happen to really like working through spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. Some people hate it, and whether it's a spreadsheet or QuickBooks or a spiral notebook where that's
Mhm.
that's your document that you use, whatever it is, it's got to be in one place. Maybe your bookkeeper uses QuickBooks and you can't stand it. I feel lucky that we switched all of our companies over to QuickBooks Online. We'd been
Mhm.
using desktop through Citrix and all this kind of nonsense that was really clunky, and it made me not work in the books as much as I should.
Right.
And now it's a little bit more streamlined, and QuickBooks Online has come a long way, so I think it's worth it. But spending time in there and exporting to spreadsheets and saying, okay, here's really what it is. And oh yeah, sales tax, they're not including that in this thing.
Yeah.
And like you said, the principal payments and all that kind of stuff. So again, taking the time to pull all those things apart on Tuesday at 3 p.m. when nothing's going on, or
Yeah.
Monday at 8 a.m. Like it's, you know, I have a bit of a privileged situation because this is all I'm doing. I keep glancing at this big wall of post-it notes that I have and big sheets of paper on the wall. But I know other people have, homeschool and stuff like that to deal with and kids, but um, creating some time to do this is pretty critical if you want to get the business to survive.
Yeah. So going backward a little bit to what you were saying a few minutes ago, also about, I'm a huge fan of 60 Minutes. Um,
Really?
and yeah, it's like my husband and I have a routine. Like every Sunday night, we make a martini and we sit down and we
Hmm.
get some information. And
Gin
usually it's
martini or
like
vodka martini?
one of each. I'm a
Really?
vodka and he's been, yeah. Not I don't consume one of each, but he drinks gin and I drink vodka.
Okay.
60 Minutes has been covering obviously COVID-19 very closely since
Hmm.
the onset, the early March. Their offices were hit pretty hard by COVID.
Mm.
Um, and they're doing a lot in terms of focusing on small business owners, both in the food industry and outside of the food industry. And also, like last night, they talked to some farmers, which is a really interesting story. But really, last night it dawned on me, and it had dawned on me before, but it was very much in my face last night in one of the stories, that so many of us do live paycheck to paycheck. And as business owners, you know, we take risks financially. That's kind of part of the game when you're an entrepreneur in many cases, right? Where you're taking on a loan, or you're taking on investment, or you're relying on investment to take your business to the next level, and all of that money can disappear in the blink of an eye, right? If you're just the money you bring in allows you to work another week and allows you to pay your staff for another week. When that income goes away, the business stops existing as it did before. It's no
Yeah.
longer operational. I tell this story often. Before I became a consultant, and actually the push in the direction to become a consultant came because I was hired by a startup who was getting a whole bunch of funding to heading into year two. And 3 days before I was supposed to start, that funding got withdrawn and that business
Mm.
closed. So
Wow.
I say this because I think it's important. Like you said, this pandemic is sort of, I forget exactly what words you use, but it's sort of magnifying that situation of the risk that we take on as individuals and businesses financially, but it exists all the time. And so
Hmm.
one potential bright spot of this, although so many people are struggling and it's so difficult, I think, is hopefully that it will change our mindsets around money, um, and get us all thinking. I know it has me thinking this way. How do we proceed as businesses? not reactionary, but in more control of our money, and in a sort of a safer financial situation, so that our
Yeah.
businesses are protected, and our individuals. There was a woman on the show last night who said, he said, when are you going to run out of money? Like, when are you going to be broke? And she, after a long pause, she said, right now. My business brought in the most money, like, for our family, but it was week to week, and now that is gone, and we don't have anything.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, identifying risk is another thing that, especially in catering, is easy to forget about,
mhm,
because there's a seasonality of it where we always kind of have a slow beginning of the year, then summer picks up, and holidays usually okay. So you get used to that. You think you're covering your risk by a new season coming in, or a new set of clients and deposits and all that kind of stuff. But really, for any business, the difference between a business and a job is the amount of risk. Anybody who's opening a business is saying, I need a loan for some money, and I need to get a bunch of other people to devote time into my business so that I can give them some of the money, and I need clients to believe in me. And that's a big risk,
yeah,
risks upon risks upon risks. And so, again, now that we have time on our hands, it's good to identify those risks and say, okay, for instance, for the cafe, what am I risking? I'm telling my landlord that I'm going to pay X amount of dollars a month, and my vendors and this and that, because I believe that myself and my team that I put together is going to make a really good product, and we're going to be nice to people, and we're going to have a nice place where people want to sit and read a book or hang out and talk.
yeah,
Um, and we believe that in the marketplace, we're taking the risk that the community is going to find value in that. And so I think when identifying risk is closely followed by really identifying value, what value is your business bringing? For the cafe, we're doing coffee, we're doing pastries, we're doing food, and all this kind of stuff. But some people come in because they want a jolt of caffeine and they need it to go to work or whatever. But I think the vast majority of our customers at the cafe are coming in to connect with someone else,
mhm,
or to connect with the community on a maybe a subconscious level, where they're coming in to just work on their laptop or work on writing their book or read a book. They're not coming in to talk with somebody else, but they could be doing that at home, and it doesn't feel the
right,
same. It's not exactly a one-to-one transfer. So when you identify that value of what a cafe is, we can work on latte art all day, and we do, and it looks awesome and it's fun, and that's part of the value. But identifying the value to then say, oh, that's how we're going to mitigate our risk of, we got a business loan, we got rent, we got vendors, all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, week, month, or year, how can you associate those levels and leverage them to go in the proper direction?
right.
Um, yeah, and it's fascinating to pull that stuff apart now, because you know, on the day-to-day grind, we were open 7 days a week. Sunday brunch was fun, and all that kind of stuff. And you don't always have the time.
I listen to the podcast Second Life quite a bit. I think it's very helpful, both for anyone who wants to embark on entrepreneurship, or who currently owns a business. Um, and there's been a lot of talk about, completely recorded long before COVID-19 was a thing, but about right sizing, and about
Mm-hmm.
doing only what your company can afford to do. And both of those conversations really resonated with me. And I thought right sizing is so interesting. And I think that what you're talking about sort of goes in line with the idea of right sizing. Um,
Yeah.
there's still going to be risk, right? You're still, like you laid out for us a couple of minutes ago, you're still going to be investing some of your own money, or taking on money, because you believe in your product, the value, and what your team can create. But the potential earning for your business, particularly your catering company, right, is very different than what it was 6 months ago.
Right.
And so, what is the right size, if you will, of the business going forward? Because the number one priority has to be the continuation of the business. And as things eventually do grow, hopefully you can bring those people back on. But if you don't right size, if you don't understand what are my non-variable costs month to month that I have to cover, and then what do my variable costs look like, then if you don't understand that and you don't right size your business, you're I think risking, you're behaving more, how do you say it, riskier than you need to, um,
Yeah.
and you can
Yeah.
find
Right.
yourself in some trouble.
Right sizing is a cool way to put it, because the first, for whatever reason, the first thing that popped in my head is like, is going out for a run, or planning to run a marathon with a pair of shoes that's like two sizes too big.
I just gave that
Just
example in one of my courses.
really?
I was
That's
like, yeah,
cool.
I was like, it's either your shoes don't fit or you're like running in an old pair of like sneakers, you know what I mean? Or you're running in like a pair of dress shoes. They're all the wrong shoe for the job. And so you're,
Yeah. Yeah, because I
make,
see one of our catering companies has kind of been running a marathon with shoes that are a couple sizes big, just in
mm,
case like we have a growth spurt,
right.
where you know it's, why not just get the pair of shoes that fit and run this marathon, and when the marathon's done, decide to grow, because that demand, it's hard to say no to jobs and to customers and all that kind of stuff, but that's a big part of, I think, maturing as a business owner is, um, driving your business in a certain direction rather than saying yes. I remember way early on in Huntington catering, I would paint myself into corners on a regular basis, and I remember one situation, I was building a subfloor with my cousin here in South Pasadena, actually, for a wedding that I booked, and the client said, "Hey, can you do this? Can you do this?" I'm like, "Yeah,
Mm.
subfloor, plywood, H clips, AstroTurf, let's do it." And my cousin Joseph and I got like 30 minutes in, and I just looked at him. I'm like, "What have I gotten myself into? This is going to take days, not hours."
You probably
And
didn't charge the
so,
right amount of money for it, I'm guessing, because
no,
you
no,
had
I
no idea
charged.
what you were in for.
I thought I was being slick because I had a friend of a friend who was wholesale for plywood. So I'm like, "Oh, I'll get a deal on the plywood and this and that." Did the math, and I don't even think I paid Joseph. Um, yeah, I probably owe him for that. But yeah, so right sizing the business in that sense is like, yeah, you can get a subfloor for your wedding, and here's what it costs. Being confident enough to say, here's what these things cost is a big part of it, and pulling back on your services to say, we do this, this, and this really well, and we got you covered. And if you're looking for a
Yeah.
concierge service, maybe it's something else. So being able to walk out of a situation is just as important as getting in and getting the contract signed and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. I know from companies I've worked for, catering companies and non-catering companies, and clients that I've worked with, there is, I talk a lot about, sales are important, right? You got to, in order to be in business, you need revenue coming in the door, right? Like you're saying, you can pay attention to all the numbers underneath that gross profit line, but if there's nothing coming in up top, you don't really have a business. And so there's a balance of, being aware of what it costs to run your business and also what sales and revenue are needed to continue being in business. And so often people just have their eye on that top line, and the opportunity to make more money is so attractive that we say yes to things,
Yeah.
and they aren't in our wheelhouse. And what ends up happening is oftentimes the team, the staff gets burdened, really burdened
Hmm.
with the additional work. And
Yeah.
so many things can happen. Right now you're paying your either not paying your team appropriately for the work that they've just taken on as extra for you, right? Or you're paying now overtime, or you misquoted because this is something that you don't do and it's costing you more money. And it's something I see very often where you are chasing the revenue dollar, but in the end the result is losses,
Yep.
because it's scary to say no, I don't do that.
Right.
Or no, here's somebody else who can probably do that better for you. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a good lesson to learn, and hopefully it doesn't have to be learned the hard way too many times. That makes sense.
It had to be learned the hard way for me. I would consider that like the first decade of business where, you know, I don't know, there's an overextension of yourself. And when you are a business and it goes in that direction, you're overextending your team and your resources and all that kind of stuff. So, when you look back at those situations, and there's, you know, dozens upon dozens to choose from, you realize that the decisions you're making in a non hurried state, or a state, a point of clarity and understanding and foresight, you can see those things coming. But back to, for instance, you know, 6 months ago, when we were all in our you know, world of grinding through business and sales and all that kind of stuff, we're not always in that state. And so checking out to identify those things is really, really important. And I'm even considering that going back into, you know, eventually this is going to be done and we're going to have cures and all that kind of stuff, and we're going to get back to it. And so how do I either schedule time or give myself some sort of priority space to get in the mind state of, I see these things happening, I've got, you know, all my notes up, and I can see, yeah, this is the right size, to use that term. This is the right size that I want to be at, because I've done the math on this right size, and it ends up with a positive net that is a huge, important goal on the P&L. And also I'm looking at the balance sheet with all that kind of stuff. So staying true to what your right size is really important. And I know in the past, you know, years ago, you know, when we would add that fourth or fifth wedding onto a weekend, it's like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then we did, and we worked through it. And in hindsight, looking at those weekends, like, you know, how worth it was that last event. Or it usually wasn't even a big one. It was like something small that was like, oh yeah, well, we're already kind of prepping the food here, and we can drop it off in this way. And we thought we were articulating some, you know, Globetrotters playbook. We really didn't need to. You know, sticking to the plan is great. And that's really where scalability is going to come from, and being able to transfer a message to a team that's going to do a similar job over and over and over again. The more things you can solidify for your team and have that constant, the more they're going to be able to pick up their heads. And if you think of a catering team on site, the more they can pick up their heads and be more human and say, oh, hey, did you have a question, or can I help you with this? If they're worried about, you know, figuring out the timeline, or, oh, do we have enough dessert forks and all these things? And I've been having these conversations with other caterers. There's a really cool group called Potluck Connect that my friend Beth set up. So we're exchanging ideas and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of get to the point where the more stuff you can give your on-site team that is actual and they can count on and concrete, then they can be creative, positive, fun-loving humans that are at a family event. You know, and they could be, at that point, they could be way, way better of a bartender, server, cook, chef than you can ever be, because the business owner has all this stuff on their shoulders that they're carrying around with them. And when there's a wedding on Saturday night and it's everybody's having fun and this and that, they know what's coming on Monday morning and they're already preparing for it. The business owner is.
Yeah.
So you need that detached event service staff who's, you know, maybe got another job or going to school or whatever, but they're just out there performing and doing their job and making your whole company look great, and they're looking great and they're getting paid. And then it's a symbiotic kind of thing where typically that's can be referred to as a shared horizon, where you have an idea as a business owner, you got to get it out there. When you can get your team on that vision, then you're one step further down the road. When your client or your customer also understands that, everybody understands, you know, business owner, team, customer, what we want to do is we want to have a great event with some food and some drinks. Everybody has a good time and this and that. The responsibilities go in different directions from that point, but that point, shared horizon, North Star, whatever you want to do, I feel it's the business owner's job to define that because I have more experience at this process than anyone in that realm, than the client or the servers or whatever else, because I've been looking at it and dissecting it for the longest period of time. So it's my job to define that shared horizon, that North Star, share it with the team, and then associate responsibilities from there.
I think that there is
Mm-hmm.
freedom in systems and clear, what would the word be? Basically just systems and expectations, right? And when everyone meets that, then there is that freedom, like you were saying, to be a human, to make decisions in the moment that are the best for both your client and your company.
Right.
And I think, like you were saying, how do we create those systems now? I think that's the programming, right, that you were talking about when you and I had a conversation. And I think that makes sense both for a catering company, both for the actual production of the event, the preparation of the food in the kitchen, the sales team. And, when they think about it, like when a sales person knows, what do we sell and what don't we, right? They're not panicked on the phone when someone asks them if we can build a subfloor, and then, hold on, let me figure that out for you. And they're running to the owner, to figure out if they can do it or not. If there's a clear set of expectations and deliverables, then again, their communication becomes clear, and then they can it's like what you're saying, I think, can spread throughout the entire company. And then
so that to talk about programming, that's exactly where my head goes with all these things. And I wrote my first blog article for my catering software website. And I think it's
clear for everyone listening, Justin has been working on for some time. It's really amazing. Application, do we call it? Is that the right term? Software?
Yes. A solution. We're calling it a solution. Yeah, it's called Henry. So we put up a little splash page website, and I put the first blog article up, and it talks a lot about what this idea is, where when I look back at, things that have gone well and not gone well on site for catering events, 99% of the time it's related to somebody who doesn't have the proper information at the proper time in this sequence of events, because it's a very well orchestrated, play that happens. When it goes right, everybody knows what they're doing, where they're this and this, and, vendors park here, trash goes there, cocktails are at this time, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so Henry, our catering software that we've been designing for about 7 years, is really a lot about that. It's about letting the computers do what they're supposed to do. And David Allen is another guy that I really enjoy reading and listening to. He's famous for saying that the human brain is great for having ideas, but not storing ideas.
That is so true.
Right. And so the opposite, our computers are great for storing ideas, but they're not having ideas. And that the AI discussion is something else altogether. But so what Henry does in particular for event-based catering, not sandwich and salad catering, or not a restaurant that kind of does delivery. It's specific for companies like Huntington Catering that have an event that's happening. And from that, there's different viewpoints of what the on-site staff needs to see, what the cook needs to see, what the client needs to see, what the warehouse manager, staffing manager, what the salesperson needs to see. And everybody getting into one point that, or actually different points. There's a central thing that isn't any one person. It's the event, And so using that tool, and we've been defining and updating and continuing to clarify that tool of giving the right information to the right person in the form of, a printout, right?
Yeah.
Is so important, because everybody on site wants to do a good job. Even the person carrying a cocktail tray, they don't want to not have the answer. They don't want to be in the position of, oh, well, I guess this didn't go well. They might not know the person getting married. They might not even know me. They might not even know the business owner or whatever, but they want to succeed. They want to do their job and feel good about it. And catering is a long day. It can be hot. It can be raining, it can be all sorts of things. And at the end of the day, you're going to get paid, right? But with getting paid, or at the end of the pay period, rather, back in the day, we used to get paid at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool. But at the end of the event, you know that you've worked, you're going to be able to pay rent, whatever, but you want a feeling of this went well. This is good. The client's happy. My catering team's happy. And if everybody has the information and the tools to do the job, there you go. And again, we get caught up in weekend of events. And once in a while, when you make the same mistake twice, you just, pull your hair out and start beating yourself up.
I think there's, and any caterer listening to this, or anyone who has worked in catering listening to this, you don't want to show up again and work another event if you feel like you were hung out to dry, like you just showed up and you were asked to do a job and you didn't know what was going on. It just feels really terrible. And so there literally is no single job that's more important than another when it comes to producing a catered event. That's really like building a restaurant somewhere else, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And providing top of the line service. And so every single person needs to be fully informed from the beginning to the cleanup, to the garbage pickup, right? At the end of the night, because everything could go swimmingly and the garbage is left there and it's not supposed to be. And that's the last thing that client, sees about your service.
Yeah.
And
it's a problem. And then I got to go back on Sunday morning and pick it up.
So then there's more time and then there's more money. And And I have to say that, as a former buyer for a catering company who didn't have a tool set up, and we were constantly looking for solutions. When I saw Henry, I was pretty excited. I was like, this makes a difference. I really, really like that. We're at the hour mark, but we froze a couple of times. And so I have a couple more questions I just want to kind of ask you.
Let's do it.
Because we touched on the fact that you were working right now on building a lean and expandable business model. I know we talked about that. Part of that is digging into the P&L, and you mentioned, identifying things like 2 internet lines to the cafe that aren't necessary. And that's the kind of stuff that you just miss on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis if you aren't taking the time to look at your financials, right, with some sort of a microscope. What else did you kind of look for or address in your P&L when you sat down to look at it? And then if this makes sense, what are your action steps sort of going forward for not only identifying, so now you're probably identifying, okay, these are things we can change right now to make a more lean and expandable business, but what do you do going forward?
Good question. So especially as it relates to catering, event catering, we are continually expanding and contrasting, and it's not always every Saturday. Sometimes it's a couple of slow weeks and a busy week.
Right.
Because that levity or consistency that you want to give to the calendar is at times your worst enemy. You overextend yourself to do a couple of small deliveries during the week so you can keep people busy to then be able to do the big events on the weekend. And then I forget the guy who wrote the book. One of the guys that started Pixar wrote a great book, and his example of making bad movies is called Feeding the Beast, where you're making these bad movies or these small movies you're not really into, just to feed the beast, to keep the company going, to make the big movies, and then it's this vicious process that goes back and forth. So creating a lean organism that can adjust is, I think it really starts with your resources, and the most valuable resource anyone has is their team, the people that can do more than just your 2 hands can do, So how can we get back to having, a busy weekend of events and grow again? Because we know growing's easier when money is coming in, but then shrink back because next weekend it's slow or next month it's slow. How can we prepare for this and have more of a just-in-time type approach? And that's not a silly pun on my name, but the Toyota guys, there's a, forget what the book's called. I think it's called The Toyota Way.
Mm-hmm.
How they changed the whole way that car companies service vehicles and put them together and this and that. No, it's all just in time. They get it right before they need it, rather than having a big warehouse full of stuff that they might need someday or might need next month.
Right.
And so, their footprint shrinks and all that kind of stuff. So that expansion and contrast that is going to happen, and when it gets bigger and you have more money to deal with it, maybe you outsource a couple of things. A number of years ago, we had 4 cargo vans and 4 box trucks, which I thought was really, really cool. And it was because we were busy and we're like, okay, well, we can rent or we can lease and save money and this and that. But then I didn't think about all the time that, the insurance and the parking spots and the maintenance and this and that for this fleet that was for, I don't know, a couple of weekends that we were really, really busy. It was awesome. And on those weekends, the bottom line looked great. Right. But then spreading it out, it was kind of break even. And there was probably some of my ego involved. Like I'm a kid boy, like more trucks. Cool. Yeah, let's do that. Right. So should we just rent, should we maybe just have a couple of vehicles to keep us limber? And then when we expand, rent and pay a little bit more. But then when we contrast, we're safe. And this coronavirus is the ultimate contraction of everything. Right now we don't need anything other than, I don't know, the internet and air conditioning. Yeah. So we don't need any trucks. And thankfully we're not, they've all deceased. Not all of them. We got a couple left, but so yeah, the lean approach to forward thinking is, I don't think anybody's really anticipating this happening again, and not referencing like the coronavirus is going to come back in the fall and all that. That's not what I'm saying, but I don't think we need to prepare necessarily for another global pandemic to flatten us, because that might be, I don't know. I guess that's a different conversation, but preparing for the best that to expand and contrast is important on every level. On your going down that list or that circular kind of business model, marketing, sales, production, accounting, and then back over all those things that you got to check off. Where can you cinch things up, and then where do you need more elasticity in the system? And it's different for every business. But the more time you put into identifying, again, the risks associated with those high leverage pieces and the value that you can associate to those pieces, then it makes more sense, and you can double down on those things, being confident that that value is there, and it all works out.
I expanded that approach to in terms of catering and being lean, right? And then expanding when you need to. I think you can drill that all the way down to your ordering, right? Like your ordering of supplies, what are you warehousing? What are you not, right? Does it make sense to save 3 cents per unit if you need to spend, $5,000 more or several hundred more dollars to just have it sitting there for X number of weeks or months? And same with ordering of like food inventory. As food businesses, one of the largest expenses is the food, right? Labor is always huge, but then you're looking at food, and as a variable cost, having that under control can have a big impact on your bottom line. So figuring out ways to understand, what do we really need? I work with a lot of businesses that have a PAR system. So it's like, we always have 10 of this, 12 of this, 24 of this, what have you. And then it goes unused, and then the team gets an awesome family meal, which is great for the team. But like, we don't really, do they really need beef and, pasture raised chicken and like all of these high end things that are just going bad in the fridge, rather than, beautiful vegetables and a little bit more humble food, because the business can't support, feeding their team quite that well.
And those are there's a long list of luxuries that you have to be honest with yourself on. But taking a little bit of time to identify those luxuries and saying, all right, we're doing this, we're getting the Jordans this year because we're really going for the championship, or I don't know, I'm just wearing sandals for a while.
I'm just starting out let's take it easy and not spend all the money right out of the bat. And I think going back to Henry, or inventorying systems, or ways of tracking your finances. And to me, what it all boils down to is, like you're saying, being honest about what do we need, what do we not, what is the right size of our company, what do we offer, what do we don't. You create the systems for every part of your business, and I think you nail that and you get that working right, and it proves that it's working right. And then you analyze, okay, do we want to just stay this size? Do we want to keep operating this way because it works and we've got a positive bottom line and everyone is satisfied financially and with their work, etc.? Or do we want to grow this? And then if you decide to grow it, then having it be a thoughtful process and really doing the work inside the business to set yourself up for success, so that as you grow, you don't lose all of that foundation and all of that support that your team previously had. And so I think, Henry is a great way, once that becomes available to the masses, for catering companies to start that process. And like you said, if for now it's spreadsheets and, shared files on the computer, like that's okay too. It's whatever works for your business. But I think that's a main takeaway from our conversation is understand, sort of the right size of your business. What is the risk you are truly taking on, and how do you feel about that, and your ability to manage it, right? And setting your team up for success, I think is a big part of it as well. And that comes down to doing the work as the owner, to support your people and yourself, right? Because like it feels really good to go to work every day when you have a sense of control and that you're aware of what's going on in your business, from the financial aspect all the way to how the client is being serviced at the end.
And that's been an interesting piece of comfort that's come from this, I don't know how long it's been, 6 weeks or 7 weeks, knowing that what pieces are moving and what pieces aren't moving is a strangely nice way to operate, because it's the cafe's closed. I know exactly what's happening right there, and so that rebuilding starts from, okay, this is where we're going to go from here on out, whenever that is. I don't know. We're considering opening up in a couple of weeks, but we'll see what happens with the roadmap. Have you got a copy of Ellie's roadmap to reopening?
I do not.
It's on the city website. The 4 stages they're pretty well mapped out. There's no dates, of course, but it's interesting to see. Religious and weddings and all the public events, like not public events, but even kind of large private events, those are last on the list. So catering's got a long way to go.
Yeah. For anyone who wasn't here at the beginning, or just because we're at risk of having lost the beginning due to some technical issues, which we'll continue to sort out and improve. Justin from Huntington Catering, Kentucky Taco, Lost Parrot Cafe, and the pizza company. Tell me the name again.
Pie Life Pizza.
Pie Life Pizza, and Henry, the software solution for catering companies. Thank you so much for your time today. One more.
I can't forget my valet guys, White Label Valet.
Amazing. You are a jack of all trades. I feel like jack of all businesses. I appreciate your insights. I took notes, all of the recommended reading that you offered up during this conversation. Thank you for that.
There's a lot more where that came from.
I know that you are always continuing to grow as a person and as a business owner, and I appreciate your spending some time with me, and those who will be listening in on the recording. Cool. So thank you.
Yeah, this was neat.
Thank you again. I appreciate your time, and good luck with everything. I'm sure we'll be in touch again soon.
Yep. Talk to you soon. Take care.
Right. Thanks, Justin. Bye-bye.
Bye.